All right. Welcome, everyone, back to Black Liberation Media and our continuing conversation with Gen Z as the mic and our assessment of 100 plus days of the Donald Trump administration, part two. Please, everyone, as you all are joining us, like, share, subscribe, support the platform however you would like. And with that, I would like to turn things over to our in this case, leader and the font of this idea and this great project, who, among many other things, is the founder and executive director of Public Squared Amplified, who is the host of this particular program, Josie Gonzalez. So, welcome back, Josie, and thank you very much for putting this together. And let me make sure you and everyone are unmuted. Good to see everybody. And please, whenever you're ready, take it over.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Listen, it's an honor to be back on Black Liberation Media again with you as host. This is, we're building a speakers bureau out of these amazing young people. We're learning every day and we're growing. And so I think this is a phenomenal piece. We did a panel discussion last year in our community journalism class, and we got a bunch of folks our age, Jared, and the idea was we were going to have an intergenerational conversation, and ended up with just us talking to each other, and they didn't engage the young people in the conversation. And I said, "You guys can't come back." And then Zoe proposed the idea, and I said, "This is great." So we're here and for the third time, and I expect that we will be here many more times. And so thank you for being an amazing partner. There are not many spaces that are leading Black news journalism spaces. And so we're happy to collaborate with you for you to expand the opportunities for our young journalists and our young Speakers Bureau. I mean, this Speakers Bureau is made possible by the New Jersey Civic Information Consortium. As everyone knows, public funding for media is under attack, under assault. We're also feeling the impact, and we hope that those who are in New Jersey will get out and support the consortium and the public funding for local news. We are a multi-award-winning local nonprofit news organization. We, this past year, the awards made to MAOK and Renee Johnston, who's here, of course, with us, was compounded by this amazing national headliner award for Brian Branch Price. We're honored by it. We're a small newsroom. It is rare for a small newsroom to get a national headliner award. So big up to all of the journalists who work really hard in Public Square and wear multiple hats. It's why for the past 3 years we've been winning awards. Please go to the website and read their stories. I want to extend my gratitude once again to the 7 young people who are here today. I mean, just amazing that you guys show up and are willing to do this. Thank you for being thoughtful and brilliant and courageous and radical in your critique of our current existence. Thank you so much. As always, I'm honored to have Jared as the moderator for this. Jared is a professor of communication and Africana studies at Morgan State University and the author of the Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. I don't have it in front of me. I've read it. Thank you, Jared, for that. And as I said last time I was here, everyone should read it. It's an amazing critique and worth reading. We believe social media platforms, media corporations, press, etc., are portals that reinforce colonialism, oppression, and racialized capitalism. But these tools, as we're doing here, as you're doing with Black Liberation Media, and we're doing in our tiny space of 3 of us, can confront and decolonize the spaces in which we exist. We are attempting to do it, and I know that you are. I want to set the tone for us. Once again, we must recognize that the systems in which we're positioned rest in settled colonial constructs derived from acts of theft and ethnic cleansing of a people, and the enslavement for wealth accumulation of another. I want to thank everyone in the audience for creating space for these young people. And I want to hand it off to Shani, who will introduce herself and the rest of the panel. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Josie, and thank you, Jared, and everyone for hosting us here today. It's my third time doing this. I love being here. It's always an awesome conversation, and thank you to Black Liberation Media for giving us this platform. So my name is Ashani, and I'm a junior at Edison High School here in Central Jersey, and I've been in Public Square for more than a year now, and I've gotten the opportunity to write some awesome articles that go through things like femicide, international issues that come to New Jersey, and also recently I've been covering a lot of articles on civics and democracy and activism here in New Jersey. A lot of it's just been about people coming together for democracy, which I think is really important and it's really hopeful. It's why I'm so excited for a panel like this, because it's once again an opportunity for young people and older people to come together to have a conversation to show that unity is the way forward.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashton Dakin. I'm extremely excited to be here again with my co-panelists to hear what they all have to say. It's been about half a year, so who knows how things have changed. Dr. Ball, also excited to share this space again with you to see where your ideas might take us, where we might go with our discussion. As far as what I do outside of these discussions, day to day, I'm a chemical engineer. I work in pharmaceuticals, in process development, so making the process to make your drugs. And at night, I go to law school because I see a career for myself in patent law. I'm about halfway done, so pretty tired, but I'll make it through the end of it. Zooey, I think you're muted.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Zooey. Great to be back together with everyone. I think we've had 3 panels so far. Definitely, like, now that 100 days have passed, interested to see what everyone's thoughts are. I know, like Ashton mentioned, being busy. I'm sure everyone is involved in different ways. So what ways are you thinking about political atmosphere as well as like community organizing, etc.? Interested to see that. Outside of this panel, I work in I basically build tech for hospitals, so I travel a lot across the country and even now globally a bit, building different automation software within hospitals.
Hi everyone, my name is Richard and I am a first-year student studying neuroscience at the University of Pennsylvania. And I always love these conversations. We see a very diverse panel here, and it always gets me really excited to talk about really contentious topics from a lot of different perspectives. So it's always a learning experience for me as much as I hope it is a learning experience for everyone on this panel and everyone watching it. And I just really look forward to the conversation. And outside of that, I do work for my school's daily newspaper. So I do have some experience in journalism. And right now, for the summer, I'll be working in a lab on campus, and I'm hoping to write some articles about new research development happening in that realm. So that's something I'm looking to expand to as well. So yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm Sadie Springer. I'm a rising sophomore at Brown University, planning to concentrate in political science or international and public affairs. I've been on the panels now about 3 times, and this summer I'm planning to participate in PSA's journalism course. And at school, I'm a part of the Black Student Union and Student Labor Alliance. And in high school, I ran a bunch of clubs, including like Students for Justice and an intersectional feminist club, where I kind of became interested in having discussions with people like this. So I'm really excited for an awesome conversation.
Hi everyone, my name is Fatima. I am a filmmaker. This is actually my first time on the panel. I primarily work in documentary, going to places like Connecticut, Arizona, doing documentaries on all kinds of people all over the world. And I also run my own production company, TFQR Films, where I take in my own clients and also do, short films on the side.
Hi everyone, my name is Zoe. I'm going on what's going to be my third year.
I think we're having a hard time hearing you. Sorry to cut you off. There's something.
Is this any better? Or
a little bit, yeah, but yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just project a little bit. So hi everyone, it's really great to be back. My name is Zoe. I'm going on to what's almost my third year working with Public Square Amplified. I started out as a community reporter and over time, about a year ago, started working in an additional capacity in managing our social media and a lot of our communication relations and doing community outreach and things like that. I just finished my first year of college at Brandeis University, but I'm making a transfer over to Fordham University to complete my undergraduate. And I'm studying a combination of journalism and political science. And throughout high school and college, I've been very interested in law and legal studies, and especially making law and legal writing more accessible to the public. And it's really great to be here, as always. Thank you so much, Jared and Black Liberation Media, for having us.
Right on. Was that everybody? Are we? Sorry, I think I lost track. Yeah. Right. So, I don't know to what extent you all feel like it already occurred, but one of the initial questions that we had set was for you all to update any individual work and organizing efforts. Was there anything that anybody thought that they left off or wanted to elaborate on in terms of updating on those particular aspect of your lives? Okay. So in our last discussion, you were critiquing the elections and results. Did your analysis, how did your analysis turn out in terms of predicting where we are? And maybe just adding to that, if any of you want to add any thoughts about where you think we are in these 100+ days of the return of Trump.
Yes, of course. So I think right after the election, one of the main conversations that we had as a panel were regarding Trump and global affairs, and also how the effort at bipartisanship would go and how polarized DC and then state politics would become. And so, in regards to the latter, I think we almost were very hopeful in our discussion afterwards, and we probably did not expect the level of polarization that's happening now with all these the using of justice systems to take down political opponents, which is happening a lot, even with the congresswoman in New Jersey and Ras Baraka. It's happening very frequently. So the lack of bipartisanship and just the polarization in politics is probably way worse than we expected it to be, and that is really unfortunate because that is not the recipe for a united front or united progress. Regarding global affairs, I think it went in the way we expected it to, where we have this tariff war, though it's eased down a lot with China and other nations, and that made sense considering the fact that Trump has always been the type of president who wants to move industries into the U.S. and wants to establish U.S. as the big economic power compared to the other BRICS bloc nations. And then on the Middle Eastern front, it's been surprising almost the amount of steps he has taken to create better relations with them, even though it goes against prior American global policy. So all of those I feel like the overall sentiment is that what happened was everything we expected times 10. Whatever we expected, all our expectations were blown away in every regard, and everything's happening at a much more extreme level than we expected it to be going.
I want to add on that to Ishani, if that's okay. One thing that we didn't see coming, I think, is the fragility that rule of law would come to have now. And when I say that, I'm speaking about the inability of law firms to not give away legal services to the Trump administration, to not capitulate towards an administration that wants to overreach into the ability of people to find a defense for any legal attack the administration's making. We saw retaliation from Donald Trump to the firms that were connected to attorneys that were conducting investigations into different matters over the course of his presidency. So I think the hope that I had in December for our conversations was that, well, the court system and the legal system will still be one of the last gates to stop any reckless behavior that Trump might take. But I think we're seeing that with each new challenge to the legal system, Trump is finding a line. Trump and his administration, I want to say, because I can't give him the credit for this, is finding like a new line to push the boundaries of the rule of law. So that's, I think, one comparison I want to make.
Yeah, I think the part that I find interesting is like everything times 10. But I feel like half of that everything is like a show and not real. And then the other half is like actually reality, which is concerning. Like one of the parts of that being like increased deportations. Like even like I carry around my passport card now because I'm just kind of scared in New York City of what's going on. I've also been doing a bit of like community organizing and passing around like knowing your rights in terms of like how do you respond with that. So it's like flyers like these, and I think that is not something I expected to happen this fast versus other parts like tariff war. One day it's one thing, the next thing it's another, and it's half of it is actually not true. So it's interesting where parts of it are like increasing tenfold and other parts are not. But I think parts of what's happening now are pushing the boundary of what we thought was possible with the government system and like causing people to want to question what's going on. I know I've also noticed this in my workplace and also outside, that people are more vocal about how they believe or what they believe in. In fact, I feel a lot of people are more vocal about being supportive of Trump when maybe they weren't like the traditional Trump supporter 100 days ago. And they're like, oh, I was always a Trump supporter. I was like, oh, really? I didn't know that. I think I've had that conversation with people way more than I've had before. So I don't know, some observations there.
I definitely agree with that sentiment. There are a lot of people who I think surprisingly in this past election supported Trump because of his business policies as opposed to their focus on immigrants and international affairs. So that has been very surprising. And in addition, his recent like affiliations with countries in the Middle East, like Qatar, like him receiving like that huge, like I think it was like 400 million jet, like that was crazy and a little bit suspicious because like the huge gift, like I don't, that was very unexpected. But then also you have things like sanctions being lifted in Syria, so that was also surprising. And I guess to kind of circle back over to the first question, I kind of blanked, but doing organizing, like attending protests, or recently like I did a short film on Syria and kind of emphasizing the humanity on the people in there, and not just in Syria, but for people struggling kind of all over the world, and just looking past just how media portrays people to seem as.
Yeah, I remember one of the main talking points of our last panel was this lesser of the two evils narrative between Trump and Harris, and that's something that really resonated with me. And kind of as a result of that, I really did anticipate that there would be a larger portion of third-party voters in this upcoming election, but it actually decreased by a significant percentage. And that, to me, I feel like I initially believed that maybe people are becoming disillusioned with the Democratic or Republican Party. But instead, I've noticed, at least on my campus, that as a result of the election, campus life has become a lot more polarized. I would see a lot of student-run, like organized groups or party groups on campus becoming a lot more violent. And I remember after the results of the election, um, a lot of teachers actually canceled class, just like in light of people's feelings, so to speak. And I feel like that kind of caused a lot of aggravation on campus because, again, people felt very like, I feel like more than usual, very strong emotions about the results of this election. And I just really think that that kind of polarized our political state even more. So that was definitely a direction I wasn't expecting at all.
I think in terms of the accuracy of my prediction, I think I want to focus more on the response of the people and less on Trump's policies, just because I kind of knew they were going to be unpredictable. And, he had all of this big talk. And, we've kind of seen him follow through on a lot of the like promises of Project 2025. I think kind of my naivete lied in, in December when, Luigi Mangione kind of took radical action and killed the CEO of United Healthcare. I kind of felt all of this like tension and kind of like this stirring, and I was like, the class revolution is coming. I was very confident, and so I think it's been a little disappointing to me to see kind of the inaction, and maybe it's just not featured, and obviously also a lot of Trump's policies are inflated and his actions and his speeches and his tweets. But I think a good example of like possible action, but there's kind of a double-edged sword, is I think, Cory Booker's filibuster was something that I haven't seen before. And that was pretty awesome to witness, especially being from Jersey. But at the same time, he is complicit in the genocide in Gaza. So that's like something, kind of the like moral struggle between that. I don't know. I kind of just assumed that something radical and some sort of resistance would happen. But like, I think, and I've talked to people, and that was also kind of the assumption, but you can't like assume something without actually like trying to make it happen and being a part of it. And I don't know like who would be the ones to like step up, but I kind of, the insurrection was an insurrection. But kind of that like, almost like in some sense of like organizing, it was kind of an impressive feat. And so I was expecting, obviously not an insurrection storming the Capitol, but some sort of like outcry, civil disobedience collectively from leftists or from Democrats. So that didn't happen.
I feel like everyone here is really capturing kind of the breadth of what is going on right now. And I think last time we spoke to this, that there was at the time, and it's only kind of increased so since then, this inundation of things happening. And I mean, for all that he went back and forth on saying whether or not it was his or hisn't, Trump had Project 2025 outlined and essentially ready to go from the moment that he entered office. And there's a really good site, I think it's called Project 2025 Observer, where you can see essentially for every bill or every goal, quote unquote, that they have proposed, the status of it. And at this point, they're about 42% of the way through Project 2025 from the last time I checked. And so I think we spoke to this last time, that we would see this inundation of things happening because that was how it was designed to work. If you have all of these policies going on with immigration and then foreign policy and then the education system and law, and all of these things are happening at once, it's completely designed to make all of us scared and fearful and not know what to do. And so like Sadie, you said, even when someone like Luigi Mangione does what he did, and, you know, everyone's kind of looking to one another like, okay, like, are we going to do something now? Is this the call? Is this the move? We're still so bogged down by the fear that these policies and then later the media come to just keep sort of raining down on us. And I think a lot of it has to do with design. And I think we did speak to it a lot last time. And, you know, part of these panels are to make us talk about it and talk about ways to move and ways to act and ways to engage one another and push past that sense of fear and actually start moving and organizing. Since our last discussion, I've taken on a series of articles looking at different organizers in New Jersey. And a lot of them are saying the same thing, that the design of most of this stuff is to keep you scared. And as soon as you start branching out and moving into your community and working with your community and building up solidarity with your community, that fear doesn't go away, but it becomes something that you can push past and start actually addressing these policies. And I think I'm sidetracking a little bit, but it's going to show that the inundation that I think we talked about being on the rise during our last panel has kind of just, whether or not it's 10 times what we thought it would be or not, it's definitely happening.
I'm just going to go ahead and throw out the word allegedly, just for the sake of conversation, as regards to Luigi, just in case. But anybody else? And then I did think also, just to come back and ask again about, were there any particular shocks or revelations in terms of you all returning to or showing up anew for the first time on some campus or workplace? Were there any other responses or vibes that you didn't or did expect to see?
Honestly, I really wasn't surprised at all, because I feel like there were surprising things, like I mentioned before, like his, you know, new relation with Qatar, like that was very surprising to me, or the sanctions being lifted. But I feel like in terms of what happened in America, you know, with in regards to the protests and immigration, it wasn't surprising at all. Like he was very clear about all of that when he was going around talking about running for president. So I really wasn't surprised at all.
For me, I think one thing I'm surprised about, this is not really to my campus, because I go to high school, so not really an enlightening conversation happening there. But from my work at Public Square, one thing I was really surprised about was the amount of new coalitions that were forming. So we had the Million Voter Project, the Hands Off protest, now the No Kings protests. And so for some context, the prior is an effort by a bunch of different coalitions. We have things like the AAPI, the of religious groups, like Christian religious groups, the Latino Action Network. They're all coming. They're very like that, like a crazy spectrum of groups. They're all coming together to get more votes for the upcoming gubernatorial election here in New Jersey. And I just never expected. I felt it's kind of like this insane like amount of different types of groups coming together to advocate for democracy in the Democratic Party is really interesting. I think one of our main critiques after the last election was that the Democratic Party did not organize correctly and did not frame themselves properly, and there was a lack of proper voter outreach. I think a lot of people have learned from that. We now see much more organizing going on in the Democratic Party, and that's probably one of the best things. I won't think it's like necessarily surprising, but it's great to see this like huge surge in productivity when it comes to organizing.
I want to add on to there and maybe also give a critique of the Republican Party right now, who's been wielding power to do pretty much, as Zoe was getting at, to inundate us with whatever parts of their agenda they want to implement. And the critique comes from, I'm wondering what the plan is for an electable candidate in the future if the policies that are being passed now are not popular, if a tariff stand to raise the price of importing goods, hurting potentially smaller businesses who need to import the goods first to create whatever they're selling, or the policies that are targeting undocumented workers who there are farms in the Midwest where those are worked by those who are undocumented, and those people are now being threatened with deportation. So and then not to mention also the firing of the federal workers who were probably, doesn't matter what political party you were on, they lost their jobs. So thinking about those things, I'm wondering what future I'm wondering what effect this might have at all on the typical Trump voter, if their belief is maybe something that's much stronger than what's logical to us, if it's something that is maybe more, dare I say, religious. I think that's something that I'm watching intently to see where their line might be. And then taking that lesson to figure out, well, what is the response from either Democratic Party going to be, or what's the response from another party going to be, if that's where things are going.
Kind of in response to Ashton, this is kind of shifting the conversation a bit, and it's not on my campus, it's just something I've observed. When it comes to these like kind of religious themes and this like reversion back to kind of like evangelical traditional family structure, and a lot of like kind of the overarching themes that Trump preaches, I've noticed that like this has been combined with technology in an interesting way, and kind of bringing AI into the conversation. Trump's usage, everybody knows from the first term that Trump's usage of social media, especially X, Twitter, is like kind of outrageous, and most people don't take it very seriously. But I think his usage of AI, when it's so prominent in the like overall discourse, if you look up AI, it's on every news outlet, debates about the ethics of it, like new AI coming out, and his choice to two instances of AI usage, the like Gaza Trump promotion video. I don't know if people have seen it, but it's this like outrageous AI construction of a reimagined Gaza under Trump, and it has like Trump statues, and like Elon is eating hummus next to like bearded belly dancers. It's very, very odd, but there are kind of these like almost, he is this like all powerful ruler, and there are these like kind of religious sentiments in it, especially because it is a like country that follows Islam. So the fact that we're kind of like, worshiping not like a statue, and like that's fundamentally against Islam, and then simultaneously Trump making an AI image of himself as the Pope. Many people found that sacrilegious, and then also placing himself as this like religious figure while, making all of these executive orders and kind of blatantly ignoring the constitutional laws that we have. And it's kind of like this scary, like, and, people have been saying that a lot of Trump supporters are kind of cultish and following this. And people were mentioning that 2025 wasn't a Trump creation, and that this has been like latent, and the Heritage Foundation has been working on this for years. But I just think Trump has bolstered it and has emboldened people to kind of live their true like lives of white supremacy and of like, I don't know, worshiping not Trump, but this idea of white supremacy and making America great again.
Yeah, definitely piggybacking off that. One thing that did definitely surprise me was the extent to which Trump did use AI to bolster his administration. So, yeah, as Sadie said before, definitely all, I feel like, feed into the propaganda. Just another example of this. There's a lot of AI generated content of Trump collaging fake photos on Truth Social, and this is done to imply endorsements from a lot of public figures and celebrities as well. So that kind of feeds into the groupthink that I think Trump has reins on over his followers. And I feel like this feeds into this idea of anti-intellectualism as well. AI has been growing so much over the past couple of years, actually. The video quality, if you look at it over the past 2 years and compare it to now, it's almost like an incredibly like advanced and seamless transition, and it's gotten so much better. And suddenly a lot of more people are falling for these videos and falling for the ideas that these videos are propagating. So I feel like in this age of anti-intellectualism, Trump is really starting to weaponize AI and use it for his own personal gain. And I feel like a lot of people aren't able to see through that. And I think that is a really huge problem. And be aware of what he's doing as well. So yeah, I do think that's pretty problematic. And just like the lack of regulation on AI could become a problem if it's not managed in the short future.
I agree with. Oh, Fatima, did you want to go? Oh, okay. I agree with what you guys are saying. And on the specific pieces of like Trump's social media usage, I mean, when I saw those things, I kind of saw them more so than as any kind of flaunting of like his AI usage, I guess. It's not the right way to put it, but I saw them more so as propaganda pieces in kind of, and also you can kind of look at how sort of the White House responded to the backlash against it, which was like sort of this energy of, oh, come on, guys, you can't take a joke. Like, this is just, you know, the president's just having fun. Like, what are we doing? But what kind of has surprised me to some extent, I guess, and just the way that it's sort of happened is how our generation has just continued to fall into, in my observation, it hasn't been so much of a polarization, so much as like a siloing, where everybody, and I think like Richard and Sadie have alluded to, it is because of social media and how deeply intertwined our generation is with it, that we're kind of funneled into these different spheres, I guess, of different influencers and content and stuff like that. And so for me, the biggest kind of schism, I guess, I've seen among people my age that sort of surprised me, that I didn't think I would see as like the leading fault line, is more so the people who are engaged in some capacity and the people who have completely like just disassociated and disconnected from everything that's happening. And so, like, it's not to say that I don't understand feeling burnt out, because I mean, as a generation, when everything has just been like crisis after crisis and world ending after world ending, it's normal to just kind of be like, what is going on? But at the same time, um, it is kind of disheartening to get onto college campuses, which have been historically like such hotspots for activism, and meet so many more students than I thought that are just like, guys, it's 7 in the morning, I can't talk about this. It's 8 in the morning, I can't deal with this, for a political science class, you know? Like, it's kind of interesting to see that that's where the fault line, in my observation at least, has ended up lying. Because from everything I've noticed, the people my age who are still Trump supporters, the people I know my age who were former Trump supporters, and the people I know my age who are in the leftist space, or yeah, the leftist space, they're all still very active, and they're all still very much in tune with what's happening and keeping up with what's happening. And so I've seen more commonality among those groups, which obviously have been, you know, due to narrative and media, supposedly very, or how should I say this? Though they lie very different ideologically, they're all still very active politically. Whereas, I don't know. Yeah, that was just the biggest surprise to me, to see that the biggest fault line ended up just kind of being, in my observation, those who have just disconnected from everything that's happening, because it's become, I guess, sort of too much to bear in a lot of ways, versus those who are still making an effort to keep up, even if it's not to the extent of organizing on the ground.
I really want to highlight, oh, sorry. I want to highlight Zoe's point about the role of media in this too, because as we began this, Josie mentioned media as a way for to spread dehumanization ideals across the masses. And I think what we're seeing is our government's figured out how to use social media over the past maybe 8 or 12 years to get these ideas widespread, and understand, well, what exactly makes Ashton tick, what makes Zoe tick. And we've seen this because Elon Musk's acquiring of Twitter, turning it into X, remaking an application from in his own image, and then being closely allied with the head of the executive is, to me, too clear and too transparent of a method that the government has, that not even the government, that potential administrations can use to influence how people view issues currently and what their expectations should be for their government. So, yeah, I just wanted to really hammer home that social media was just you have some friends and you see what they're doing. I ate a taco last night. I'm going to share that. And now today it's very similar, but this time with advanced tools like AI, like what we're getting at, those seemingly innocuous posts then make a whole profile of who I am, and that can be used in future elections. So I guess one question, maybe if we can turn things back on you, Dr. Ball, a little bit. I'm wondering, this seems like um, uh, a new challenge that we're facing, and I'm wondering, with the government has this power to understand who we are, how can we kind of take that power back and communicate with each other on a more real level, if that makes sense?
It does. It's just something I struggle with all the time. In fact, as you were just saying what you said, I made a note to myself to slightly offer a reframing of what you just said. That I don't think it's the government having to catch up to the use of social media. I think it's we have to catch up to the military origins of the internet and what they have already been putting to use from the beginning. Um, I quickly, I do marvel at the fact that our current media environment is something that, without trying to stay slightly astride of any conspiracy theory, is something that that the military and the ruling elite have been putting together for the last 150 years with by design, with the goal of manipulating public opinion to the point where, as Barrett Brown said to me recently, we will be discouraged from even thinking that there needs to be any form of struggle, much less what form should that struggle take. So I've encouraged my students to just be more aware of some of that history, to maybe research some of that history in terms of the formation of this media environment, the internet, the military applications of it, the intent, if not the 100%, a successful impact. And then, of course, to join political organizations and stay in touch with one another, think critically. And then finally, as I literally asked my students just a week ago, as part of their final thought, constantly ask yourself, how do you know what you know? And why do you like what you like? Be in constant reflection of the methodology you engage to reach your conclusions, and be critical of what you like more than what you don't like. But other than that, I really don't envy the position you all are in. And I think I'm starting to think that I'm part of the last generation to have seen the untethered media universe uh, in a way that left some room for critical thinking that has been cut off by design from a lot of you, despite the wonderful efforts you all represent here. So it's obviously not 100% successful. To my previous point, I just want to encourage you all to build on the incomplete work of those in power to suppress our thoughts. So before I respond with any other questions, I'm happy to have any of you follow up or respond or even criticize what I just said there.
Yeah, I would actually like to follow up on what you said and what Richard, Sadie, and Ashton said about AI and social media. A few things to say. The first being about what you just Jared, you just said about the history of the media. And whenever I think about that, I think back to the 50s and the 60s, where we had the CIA partnering with major news organizations, and right after the JFK LBJ time, and it was to make sure that any non-main narratives were labeled as conspiracy theories, because that word was coined by the CIA and the government, and to ensure that only one narrative that aligned with the government at the time was the one that was being pushed out. And similarly, Fox News, for example, a very famous example, was made right after Watergate to ensure that the Republicans never have such disalignment and such chaos again. And I just think when we look at the history of where all these partnerships and all these news organizations come from, we have to always remind ourselves that main media news has always been just a way to frame the people's thinkings. It reminds me kind of 1984, the Orwellian novel, and how in that like dystopian novel we have this crazy world where the government controls the language. And while it seemed insane to us as readers, like, oh, this is such a dystopian world, we'd never be in it, we are in it. We are in this world just through our media, and it's less obvious, but it's the same idea and same effect. And that's why I think independent media like Public Square, like Black Liberation Media is so important. And then on the topic of AI, I know you guys are talking about all the AI usage by Trump. One thing that I read recently on the New York Times published, I think like a few days ago, like really recently, is that so like RFK Maha published this health report about, I forget what the topic was, but there were a bunch of citations that were false inside of the report. And a lot of people that analyzed it thought that the false citations was very similar to how ChatGPT makes false citations and how AI makes false citations. I think that's just insane that where we have the government putting out content that was, or like potentially putting out content that was AI'd, and this is content that was supposed to be informing important decisions. And on more like a long-term AI, I'm just like discussing AI in the U.S. and government and how it impacts social media and just other aspects of our life. Like all of you said, Trump is really pro AI investment. I'm pretty sure he announced like a 500 billion private sector investment in AI infrastructure called Stargate, which is led by OpenAI, Oracle, SoftBank, etc. And with that, we're going to have data centers and a lot of power generation facilities in the US supporting more AI usage. And there's also going to be to align with that AI deregulation. So it really seems like, from the economic perspective, Trump is trying to create more AI infrastructure here so it doesn't get shipped to other nations. So we are leading like economic power in that. And that's kind of also where tariffs come in. So it does look like, both from a social perspective and media and economic, AI is kind of where we're going in the future. And that also just raises so many questions, like concerns like the ones you guys brought up regarding what like the content that we're seeing online, regarding jobs, etc. But I think it's a kind of inevitable push, and we can't really resist it. And it's more for us to make sure that when this push does happen, we ensure that regulation is friendly, and also that the climate impact of AI, because data centers have an incredible climate impact, is properly regulated and properly dealt with.
Yeah. Oh, you can go if that's okay.
Okay, I just have a really, really quick comment, but I think like kind of on what you said, Ishani, I think that if AI is something that we know is going to be in our future, then we have to embrace it, because in order to combat like the negative, you have to be able to create the positive with the same exact tools. So I think, we have to embrace that AI is coming. And then I kind of want to go back to, the comment about Trump's AI video in Gaza with Elon Musk. And I want to disagree. I don't think that that was necessarily a religious, anything to do with religion. Because so Palestine, there are a lot of Muslims, but there's also Christians, Jews. Like, this is not a religious problem. This is deeper than that. It's about, land and resources. And so that's, when you watch that video, it's, and also Ashton, you asked the question, like, we're using social media to share about ourselves, and like, the government is seeing it and using that, like using what they know, to create this world. Well, I mean, they're kind of also, we're seeing their future plans as well. It's like right in front of our face. Like that's their plan, like to take over Gaza. Like, we all know this, take over Gaza, like use it. And then their plan is to expand. Like, if you look at Syria, Israel actually has a portion of Syria right now. So the greater Israel is like their plan. And that's something that they're showing like through this AI video. And there's a lot more that we can get into with that, but I just wanted to kind of respond to that point.
Yes, of course. I wasn't saying the genocide itself was over religion. I just think that like the video itself, like there were grander like themes just of like power and like kind of like religious illusions. But kind of going back to what Ashani was saying, not necessarily about AI, but kind of about the like Orwellian society. I think that's like a really astute point, and I've been going back to George Orwell and like referencing 1984 and looking for similarities. And I think a lot of us can agree this feels very dystopian currently. And I think Venezuela is a really good example of that, and the camps there. It's one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen. And I noticed, I'm not super following the chat, but I noticed one person commented that there were no Latinos on the panel, and I am Afro-Latina, just putting that out there. I think it's important for Afro-Latina representation. We come in all sorts of colors. But I just wanted to say that I also think immigration, I was watching this video on how the broader world right now is perceiving Trump's policies in America. And people were saying, okay, like what is something that Americans are overlooking? And we think of kind of immigration, his immigration policies as a way to keep people out. But in some regards, it's also a way to keep us in and keep us isolated and keep us broken off from the world and all of its wonders and all of its diverse peoples and ideas, which a lot of them are like rooted in resistance. And so I think that's really important to note and remember that like attacks on immigration aren't just attacks on like immigrants who maybe feel so far off from us if we aren't in those direct communities. But like it's also like this is going to affect our day-to-day lives. And I think that I was just in Miami and seeing Miami's such a beautiful city and seeing all of so many people of so many colors speaking so many languages. And Ashani, you mentioned like language control and just the possibility that like the US, which to me, like the one thing I'm proud about is how like we have so many different collections of people, even if it's segregated, even if Black and brown people are living in poverty so much of the time. I think that just make it more like homogenous it's just like the greatest loss that we could possibly experience.
Before we continued, I wanted to kind of ground part of what Ashani you were talking about in just the demand for AI, especially as a climate issue, that it exists in like a much larger context of consumption within our country and globally. That I mean, at the same token that AI uses so much consumes so much to function, my phone is the battery within it is sourced from batteries that come from the DRC. My computer's only running with electricity that continues to, also come from plants that require water and cooling and things like that. And ultimately, when we go to the root of that consumption issue, it comes down to capitalism and consumerism. And as we continue to get these new things and have these new technologies, we are not only continuing to having to work more, despite probably what people 50 years ago thought, that once we had computers and fancy technology, we'd need to work less. There's that, but at the same time, we're continuing to consume and continuing to forfeit certain rights. Like Ashton said before with the social media, the price that we pay to go on those platforms and engage with one another is that all of our data is mined and used and surveyed. And we've been for a long time a surveillance state. And this is, I think, still ongoing and I want to say not fully decided yet, but I'm not sure. But currently, I think Trump is in the midst of plans to partner with Palantir to create like a massive government database that has like everybody loaded into it with everything about them. All of their data is compiled into this like government run system. And so, we can have quick entrance through TSA now because our faces will be scanned. But the price of that is that we've become a completely surveyed state, and that for everything we're consuming and everything that we're getting, we're losing quite a lot at the same time, and continuing to, at that same token, fuel so much of the growing and continuing injustice that happens across the world and within our own country. Yeah, that was one thing I really wanted to kind of cement before we moved on, that grounding was in place.
Yeah, I guess one last thing, and I guess I feel strongly about this part because I literally build AI software, and we are not like we're not leading to being a surveilled state. Like, we are in a surveilled state. Also, like, the concern about military and government complexes, like controlling public sentiment, that's definitely happening within the US. I think one thing that came up, which was interesting, was the whole like TikTok ban. That like we wanted to ban TikTok for 2 days, and there's a lot of arguments going around like, oh, we should ban TikTok because China can control US sentiment, and like fear mongering from China when it's already being controlled by one voice, which is a US voice that none of us maybe even believe in, but it's kind of pushing that agenda. So I don't know, I feel strongly that like we should be seeing other sides or other people trying to control us, because it kind of at least reveals that it's happening from different angles, and it would force people to try and almost, you have to go and find your own opinion, go to sources like public news to figure out public square amplified to figure out what you actually believe in. You can't get that if we're fully being surveilled. So that's one side of it. And separately, the point about like, oh, AI is coming, AI is not coming, it is here right now, is being deployed. It built like AI is in healthcare, law, across the board, directly replacing people's jobs. And we're doing that now with software that's fully half-baked. Like, under the hood, you look at this, hallucinations across the board. How do you feel about models hallucinating on patient data for your own healthcare? And then you go to the hospital, and that's controlling how things are being billed. Like, that's how things work right now. Same with the law. Instead of having a law clerk, you can just have your AI assistant. But how do we trust any of what is happening? No one is controlling any of the sort of regulations behind it. There's no restraints. Also, every single piece of data and information there is being collected by those models. And if you like think it's scary scrolling on social media how good your algorithm is, just imagine that in every aspect of the rest of your life. Software is not good enough to do that, but it's getting there, and it's being deployed right now in a way where it's not even, in my opinion, ready to be. So I don't know.
That was great, Zooey. I want to add a few things if I can to that already great response. One is that Joe Biden also wanted to promote the development of AI too, and also promote investment. So we probably would have seen a similar supporting of this new technology from either administration. So what I want to question is the assumption that new technologies must replace jobs where possible. We're taught that because of industrialization that allowed us to produce manufacture goods faster so that we could have less people working, and then they lost their jobs because they were too slow to catch up to the economy. And I want us to ask ourselves what it means to replace a person's job with AI if our economy isn't ready to handle a higher unemployment rate. And I also want to say that this speaks to a larger necessity to try to change the system of two parties that are both working in corporate interest. One other thing that I want to add is that I think we were talking about building databases and the effects of which we're not going to see today. So that's why it's imperative that we use systems like the law to pass policies that can be followed by corporations, so that they don't get ahead of what they can do legally to protect people, which should be the priority of any political party that a person votes for, is to protect you from potential predatory behavior by corporations that are much bigger than you.
Yeah, I wanted to make a quick note and kind of merge sort of what Ashani and Zooey were both talking about in what Ashani mentioned about language control and what Zooey was saying, that a lot of these things are already here. I mean, I don't know for us here, but like out of the women who are here, like how many of you have used like the term like girl math? Like, oh yeah, like if I buy a bathing suit that's $100, like whatever, I'll use it 4 times, then it's only $25 each time. That's girl math. Or what's another one? Like, I'm in luteal, so I'm super hormonal, and so you can't take me seriously because I'm in luteal. Like, we see these like phrases start to proliferate around in our social media spaces, and a lot of times we willingly adopt them, whether for humor or to just express ourselves. And that those same ways that we use those words to humor ourselves or one another, in that context specifically, we're diminishing ourselves as women, at least. Like, oh, I'm in luteal, so you can't take me seriously, as if that actually really means anything, that because you're menstruating or about to menstruate, it means anything for your mental capacity or clarity. Or the assumption that because you're a woman, you spend your money more frivolously or without the same kind of intention, when most investment companies are saying that women are spending their money actually more frugally and more sensibly compared to male counterparts. But I think this segs us into the fact that we already use this language, and our language is already a lot of times just kind of outlined for us. And that builds into what we think. And given that we are surveyed as much as we are, and that this propaganda exists around us all the time, it shapes how we do think. And that comes to become an even bigger issue when we're approaching things like war in other countries, policing on our own streets. When the language is set up for us and is oftentimes inherently set up to dehumanize one another, again, it traps us in that chokehold of fearing the person who has the most in common with us and keeping us from actually advocating for anything better for one another. So I wanted to merge what you guys had said and kind of push the conversation even more forward in what Ashton was saying about needing to really change the system.
Zoe, I think what you were saying about language and about like women using language that kind of degrades them, I think that's also connected to, we see like these rising trends in social media of like reflecting more traditional conservative values, the rise of trad wives, traditional wives, and like homesteads and living off the land, which kind of could go both ways. It could be, you know, a sustainable environmental approach. And then, but right now we oftentimes see it as kind of these kind of elite people moving to a remote place and kind of disconnecting from society, and then like vlogging their lives and very focused on like raising children and homeschooling them and these like conservative values. And I think this also connects then again to, you know, once we kind of internalize our own inferiority, then like, you know, our autonomy starts to slowly be stripped away. And I mentioned this in the preliminary panel discussion, but about the Black woman in Georgia who's currently her brain dead body is being used as an incubator against her wishes and her family's wishes to carry a fetus to term, which is not only going to be born in conditions with, you know, chemicals that are like helping her, this formerly or this deceased woman, you know, breathe. It's all these chemicals are doing all of her normal bodily functions for her, but this child is also going to be born into a world that's so polarized, with the right using it as like this miracle baby, and, you know, people saying its existence is unethical. And I think this is like, that's truly one of the most dystopian things I've heard of. And I don't know, I think it's, you know, there's literally a Handmaid's Tale episode, and I think like, you know, white feminism, like dystopian media is like dangerous to use, but I do think like, you know, Black women, especially when it comes to maternal mortality rates, like this has been happening to them, to us for years. And it's very outrageous. And I think language is somehow connected to all of that. So I think it's pretty remarkable.
Okay, wow. This is a very impressive panel. If it needs to be said yet again, so I appreciate all of this. One question that just did come, that I was sort of thinking of, that I admit I've been thinking of since Ashton made this point, said something a little while ago about a criticism of the Democratic Party. I am wondering if it hasn't been already said, where you all are in terms of what responses to all of this you'd like to see from either the existing political parties that you are following or interested in, or that you would like to see take place in party formations or behavior that none of them represent. In other words, I admit I did just watch one of the channels that I follow talk where the person was making the argument was sort of yelling at Democrats as a Democrat. Admittedly, I'm somewhere else, but saying that, basically calling out his own party, saying, "Where are we at? Like, where is the vigorous response that at least some would expect to be coming from the so-called opposition?" So I just wonder if any of you have a feeling, a similar sense, maybe not for the Dems, but another political party, or again, some other formation that doesn't currently exist.
I mean, I don't know. Sorry.
Go ahead,
I,
Fatima.
I don't know if this directly answers your question, but I guess I'll just start with an answer. Personally, I've never been like a Democrat or a Republican, and I don't believe in any third party. I don't think that it's a sustainable solution. I think that both parties, yeah, you could say some are conservative, some are, not, but I think both parties kind of operate under the same ideals. But the language is very different. And I believe that, we have this concept in Arabic, we call it like an ummah, and that means like one people, like one collective people. And if you look at all of us right now, like we're all one people. We all have our own opinions, our own thoughts on how things should operate and be in this world. But at the end of the day, we have families, we have responsibilities, and we have our lives. And so I believe in, democracy in its purest form, basically. Just, you have a leader, you have, you have like what democracy is, but just without the political party aspect of it. I don't know if that answers your question.
I actually wanted to kind of sort of maybe not reframe the question, but ask a different question, which is, to what extent can our democracy actually sustain itself, or perhaps achieve a more pure sense of being a democracy with any parties, or especially with the parties that we have right now? Can we actually have the democracy that we want to have with these parties that we have, where we have, as Fatima was saying, really a one-party system where it's a constant back and forth between two sides of the exact same coin for the most part. The Democrats, and kind of alluding with what you said, Jared, that at this point it's kind of just seeming like they're putting some like progressive lipstick on a very Republican campaign, or a very conservative campaign that really has no interest in the working class, or the working class people, any of the people that really, should be the majority of people in this country at this point. And so kind of with what you said, Fatima, I'm thinking sort of similar, that we really are one people. And Ishani, the recent story that you did on the Million Voter Project, I think really highlights that if we want to achieve any kind of real democracy, we're going to need to find a lot more mutual solidarity with one another, and really stop kind of doing our part in fueling this existing two-party machine and continuing to pick between the lesser of two evils when both are evil. So I kind of wanted to maybe take the question in a different direction and see what you guys thought about that, in terms of whether or not we can even keep going with this two-party system, or with any parties in this system, and especially after the Citizens United case, when things are so just absolutely run by corporations, where we're going and where our generation has the capacity to change things.
Yeah, definitely to your question, I don't think that democratic pluralism can exist in our current political system. I definitely feel like it continuously filters dissent into binary options. And I feel like even like progressive ideas have to pass through party gatekeeping. So I do definitely think we should reconceptualize this idea of party as collective political identity as opposed to, I guess, electoral machinery. But just like about, and this is a question I'm spinning back to all of you, like, how do you guys think we can go about doing that, reconciling or even reframing the two-party system? Or if you guys even agree that this idea of democratic pluralism can exist in a two-party system, and then how we can go about navigating that, because I personally don't feel like I resonate very strongly with either of the two dominating parties right now, and I kind of feel lost in that regard. And I just kind of wanted to ask you guys how you guys see about kind of grappling with this, and maybe how we can deconstruct the two-party system, or if there is a way that it can harmonize with this concept of democratic pluralism, which is what I really stand for. But just like finding a party that associates with that has been a bit difficult for me, especially now, especially in, I guess, this Orwellian age of surveillance and AI and technology. So I just wanted to ask you guys your thoughts on that.
I was talking to Josie about this on the phone the other day, but I think I refer back to Fred Hampton a lot and the Rainbow Coalition. And I think that, like, whatever party or loosely used party emerges needs to be focused on labor, because that's kind of something that unifies literal masses. And I think that that's people's main criticism, or at least our main criticism of the Democratic Party right now, is its abandonment of working class peoples, which, you know, they kind of use for their vote and then don't aid them at all. And kind of going back to the original question, I don't know, I think my like disillusionment with the two-party system was really kind of, you know, set in stone this year. This year was my first year I was able to vote, which in a, you know, very important election, and kind of just seeing that my two options were someone, you know, who adamantly supported the genocide in Israel, and then someone who did it like waving like a Target corporation like pride flag, and kind of just like those were my options. And, you know, be turning 18 and being, you know, blessed with like suffrage, and then seeing that that was kind of what was happening. And in terms of like third party, I think we talked about this in both of the panels. And when we were talking about our hopes for the third party, and then kind of the blame game, and now I just don't see like a front runner, you know, emerging organizing. And so I think it kind of does need to start on the local level. I kind of envision you know, just like town hall meetings of working class people just talking about their concerns, and honestly like a place for just to be heard. You know, I don't have like a fleshed out 10-step plan for how to actually make that happen, but I do think it needs to be with people across the political spectrum, as, you know, Fred Hampton imagined, and working with people of all backgrounds, and just recognizing that we do have commonalities and similar struggles and similar hopes for just like a better future.
I want to add to Sadie's point about local elections. I think I was reading a piece on Jackson, Mississippi, and in Jackson, 80% of the population is Black people, and there's also huge wealth disparity. Non-white people have a higher likelihood of poverty and lower access to food, so they're probably going to be in a food desert. And meanwhile, wealth is concentrated with the whites in that neighborhood. What I was reading about was a movement to try to gain political popularity out from the Democratic candidate that was the likely winner of the mayoral race. And the movement was centered on having people's assemblies, to have people come together and have their voices be heard throughout the community. If you wanted change to be taken, there's a venue for you to say what you want to have happen. One of the results that they had was from these assemblies was that the people voted to institute a 1% sales tax in the county to help fund repairing public utility. There was a water pipeline that needed to be repaired. And now you might wonder, well, why does this have to happen through a sales tax? Why can't we just tax the wealthy? And this is when the piece started to get into the differences between political engagement and political power. So what political power would be the ability to say that the wealthiest are going to pay for this utility. What actually happened was an example of political engagement was because the members of the community decided, well, we know what we can do. We can decide to organize within ourselves and say that we'll pay 1% higher prices on goods in this county so that we can make sure our water is clean through these pipes. So the example in Jackson, this was late 2010s, maybe early 2010s is when this happened. But if you wanted to look it up, one other thing that they did was they promoted cooperatives as a way of economic development. So cooperatives in which the workers owned their labor, so that whatever profits that we think of in a typical sense would go right back to the workers who are the ones who are really putting in whatever industry that they're working together for. Those cooperatives were also linked to financial cooperatives like credit unions, so that whatever wealth was generated could then stay within the community and be used to reinvest in other business ventures. So I thought this stood out to me because a large population of Black people in a poor economic state seemed to be the right formula to wrestle control of the incumbent Democratic candidate away to still a Democratic candidate, but one that will prioritize the needs of working class individuals. So when it comes back to the question of party that I think you began this with, Dr. Ball, I am on the fence. I think I'm one of the believers that the Democratic Party can be refocused, but it's going to take a larger push with, I think, a definitive leader, whether that's a leader also not within the Democratic Party, some sort of leader for us all in this country, for that's against corporate greed, that's for individual liberties, that is for public health. These things, I think, are interests that most of the people would agree upon, and yet I don't think we have that centralized leader in the culture who's going to help take us to the places that I think most of us want to go, but we might have different ideals on how we get there.
Maybe this is because I'm a filmmaker, but I see things in story, and I see things like very, very simply. And I think really like where we start with this whole thing is just caring about people, like on a small level, like think about your day-to-day interactions, like the people you're interacting with, like that's like really where big change starts. Like big change starts small, and I think like that's where everybody, including myself, like that's how you change things. Like that's how you change politics, because when you change that, you'll look at things from more of an objective perspective, because you're not just considering yourself, you're also considering the people around you, and even more than that, like all in, like if you consider the people within America, you know what I mean? Like it's not just about you, it's not just about your community, it's bigger than that. And it's like you do things like you have a constitution, as we have, but you abide it. There's religious freedom, like mutual defense agreements, commitment to justice, like protection of life and property, freedom of movement. That's really all we need. We don't need all these extra layers and extra laws that confuse people, so I think like beginning something new, you have to undo a lot, but also I think it really just starts from a place of interaction with others on a day-to-day basis, both non-white and white, like it really, like that's I think that's the best way to change things, is speaking to the heart of people. So
I think to kind of add on to your idea of like collective empathy, I think, if we have empathy for others, it's also like the health and state of our planet. And I know we haven't addressed climate change yet. And so I was wondering, I guess, bouncing a question back out to you guys under this current administration. I mean, under the past administrations, not a lot has been done, but I feel like the media right now is kind of inundated with, current events of new policies and executive orders and all these things. And kind of, I think a lot of climate activism has kind of been pushed to the side. And, we see like, Greta Thunberg was our like, Gen Z's like leader. And then when she started advocating for Palestine, she was kind of blacklisted from that. And I think that's kind of representative of, I don't know, where we are in climate activism right now. And I think it's kind of funny because it's like Fatima was saying, if you have like collective empathy, you're going to support Palestine and then you're going to support the planet, and all these things are very intersectional and like this idea of collective liberation. So I think it's kind of ironic, or not ironic, just kind of satirical that people would assume that Greta would support Israel when even from a climate perspective, they've committed a genocide and an ecocide on top of that. So
Really quickly, to jump off something that everyone was saying before the question that's like connected back to that. I know you guys are talking a lot about different different parties and third parties and like changing up the two-party political spectrum. And while that's all really hopeful and awesome to talk about, I just don't think that's realistic. I think the two-party system is inherently um, beneficial to those who are a part of it and to like the elites of America. The two-party system allows the general public to be distracted and focus on all these like party struggles and the party like disagreements, while most of the politicians, regardless of their party, are being funded by the same lobbying groups in DC. So while we're all here arguing about Democratic versus Republican, if they're being funded by the same person, it doesn't really make a difference. And the two-party system is a great way to keep us all distracted. And so I think realistically, while it might be great to hope for a third party or to become major, or to hope for a system that doesn't have two political parties, that's just not realistic. And I don't think that change is going to happen in our lifetime, honestly. And or like if it does, it's like several decades from now, because our lifetime is still we're pretty early on in there. But to kind of tie back to what Sadie was saying when it comes to issues like climate and things like that, I think it's more productive to hope that as a people, even if we recognize that a two-party system can't be overthrown, if as people we push for more important topics to be considered and to be the focus of discussion, such as climate. And also one thing I think is really important is ensuring that things like healthcare and pharmaceuticals have lower costs in the future, and ensuring that climate is actually a focus, and we're just not just saying things like we're not just doing performist climate activism. We're actually making climate changes. When we have these new data centers, we have new innovation. We focus on sustainability when it comes to that, and it's ensuring that inside those two parties, even though we maintain this two-party spectrum, we actually have progress inside of it. And also another thing that I truly hope for is that we focus on the needs of our nation and not in overstepping our bond boundaries in other nations. Because I think that's what America's been doing a long time. It's always been the big brother, and I really hope we focus on improving because charity starts at home. We focus on improving what's happening in our country before we go and try to impose democracy or impose our ideas on other nations.
Yeah, definitely jumping off Sadie and Ashani. I definitely believe the two-party system has definitely eclipsed our attention of other issues. And I think I really do want to highlight climate change here and how I feel like people have kind of become subordinate by a lot of major oil and gas companies that they are going greener. One of like the largest myths that these companies have been propagating, like ExxonMobil, British Petroleum, is that they are investing or making investments into new renewable energy. But if you actually look at the numbers, it's actually a very small percentage of that. And I feel like when these companies kind of adopt this guise of environmental progressivism, it makes us very complacent. And I feel like that also kind of plays into America's infatuation with this idea of progressivism and this idea of adopting practices and technologies that are going to change the world, and us being the first country to do that. So I definitely feel like people have kind of become complacent and just kind of continuously consuming without really questioning the narratives and the misinformation of these larger companies. And I really do think that this is an issue that we need to focus on when it comes to tackling climate change first, is definitely trying to deconstruct the structures of, or the monopolies that a lot of these giant oil and gas companies have over our agencies, and that we are just kind of complacent beings in this. So yeah, definitely trying to look at that, I think, and that's what's being distracted from us.
Yeah.
Oh, Zooey, do you want to go?
You can go ahead. I'll go after.
Okay. I was going to say, Richard, I feel like you kind of answered your own question a bit in terms of what we can do and what you said. I mean, addressing complicity is such a big part of it. I mean, like, also not to be that guy, but to be that guy. A lot of the things that we're talking about, of course, have the thread woven throughout all of them, which is capitalism and which is the profit motivations that run so much of our country, our world, and obviously our two dominating parties at this point. And so if we do, and I think it's the most pertinent to our generation, I think that's the right word, because we're going to have to live with the consequences of it for the longest, if not us, then Gen Alpha. But we're probably one of, if not the last generation to kind of sit at that point of having the knowledge of the internet and the knowledge that the internet provides, as well as the knowledge that came pre-internet and came from revolutionaries and a lot of our like more radical forefathers and foremothers and stuff like that. We kind of sit at that sweet spot. And so one of the things we talked about in our pre-meets and in general is being kind of this, like, as a generation, this supposed harbinger of change and this force for change. And so I think the other part of it, Richard, is that you actually have to dream bigger and dream that it's possible that in kind of circling back with what you said, Ashton, about having a leader who actually cares about the people. I think in order to have that, we have to dream past a system of capitalism, because I don't think that can happen with any leader in the current system, because the current system is run by profit motives, not motives of helping one another, of taking care of people, of doing anything other than maximizing shareholder value. Again, not to be that guy, but I think those are the biggest things that we can do on an individual level, and then building it onto a community level, like with what you were saying, Ashton, that if we are gracious with one another, but also pushing one another to actually dream for a better world and make a better world possible, in calling out one another's complicity, calling out, I mean, if your friend is getting an internship at BlackRock, that doesn't exist in a vacuum. That contributes to what we're going through. If your friend from high school is posting on LinkedIn that they're starting a position with the Democratic Party and running campaigning, that doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's one another. It's ourselves. We play into this system as much as the system rules us. And so I think that's a big part of it too, is that we have to hold one another accountable, but we have to do it graciously. We have to do it in a way that, Fatima, you're saying, that we have to care about one another in the process and recognize that if we're going to build this better world for ourselves, it has to come from a place of compassion, but a place of accountability and holding one another up.
Yeah, I was gonna say something kind of similar, which is like the problem really is, or one of the problems that we're kind of alluding to, is like how corporations and government have become pretty much a union, intertwined. And it's like the whole point of, we asked about two-party system or the American democracy. One of the main core tenets of democracy is like checks and balances, where there's like consequences for your actions, and like the people meaning ruling party would be deciding those consequences, where right now we're seeing there's no consequence for action. And it was like post-industrial revolution, there's antitrust laws for not having monopolies and monoliths. We do have monoliths and monopolies right now, and there are laws in place for separation of church and state. And now it's more kind of like state versus corporation, where there's no versus. It's sort of a union. And there's people like Lena Khan has done great efforts to try to break up certain tech monoliths, but that's not enough. It's already sort of one system. And I think right now, and we're kind of alluding to this, like everyone's also tired and coping with everything going on right now. It's like mentally taxing to try and think of how can we break the system and change everything when we're just trying to like live our lives every day, and there's a looming recession and everything changes every day. So, but can we have empathy towards each other, to try to think bigger, to challenge the system? Because it's almost like we're at that point where I don't think just like the Democratic Party is going to be able to fix this at large, unless maybe the right leader is there. But for the right leader to be in place at all, people need to demand that as a collective and deeply think about what that actually means for us. I don't think we've even had the mental capacity to think bigger.
I think
Sadie, please go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. Just kind of continuing off of what you were saying. And I think even the word like change agents, I know that was one of the questions. I did a lot of thought on this question. Assuming that like change, I think that means like working within the system. And like Zoe was saying, like thinking, having an imagination to imagine like the end of capitalism. And I think that's like something I've gained a lot this year being in university, being exposed to like Marxist literary theory and theorists and greater texts, is that like now at least, even if I don't have a proposed solution, I can like sort of blurrily envision a world like without capitalism. And kind of to answer this question, I think I was, I don't know, feeling pessimistic when I was writing my bullets for it. But I said, we're tasked with changing the world while being denied housing, healthcare, and climate stability. Are we agents of change, or are we changed by surveillance, by precarity, by mass grief? And I think kind of what people were saying about like, yeah, it is true. We are very tired. And I think every generation, it's like given some, like it's handed down to them as like, you are the change agents. And I think, we've been given that, and people have been given it in worse circumstances than us. I was talking on the call 2 days ago about how kind of like decentering ourselves from the narrative that like right now we're existing in like the worst period in history. But I think that, I don't know, I think that like maybe our power isn't in changing the system, but like refusing to perpetuate it and deconstructing it completely. And maybe that seems less tangible, but I think again we have to have the imagination for that.
What I wanted to bring up while we're on capitalism is the concept of racial capitalism, which is that capitalist ideals tend to exist by keeping the non-white people on the bottom of the hierarchy, so that they can then fuel the increased desire for profit. So we see this in the transition from institution of slavery, pre-Civil War, post-Civil War, to when freedom meant two different things towards the formerly enslaved people. Formerly enslaved thought freedom meant they could use the land as they wanted to, plant cotton and also subsistence crops so that they can still sell the cotton to generate profit and use the food from the land to then survive. And white people thought freedom meant they now had to pay Black people for picking cotton. So two different ideas. One allows for economic self-determination, which was the Black ideal. And another one was just a perpetuated form of slavery. So when we speak about capitalism in the US, and also the global powers, they continue these ideals with these institutions, rather, with the knowingly keeping down non-whites. An example of this globally would be, I was just in Ghana for the past 2 weeks learning about property laws there, and and their approach to collective ownership in certain areas. And the cocoa industry is heavily regulated by the Ghanaian government. The Ghanaian government sets the prices for the cocoa, and that's then exported throughout the world. It's processed into chocolate in different countries and then sold for rates that are much higher than what they purchased the initial ingredient for, which was cocoa. And the farmers don't see the vast majority of that income that's seen by global corporations who produce chocolate. So to tie this all together, not only in the US is this racial capitalism theory a thing, it's also perpetuated by global powers. So how should we expect the individuals to change the system when at large this is what has been going on for hundreds of years, really? And I think the answer to that is what I think our panel is landing on. It's communication with each other. It's figuring out how do we influence local politics such that we can then put pressure on the systems that are keeping and that are suppressing those who should be heard, really.
And then they call it Swiss chocolate. Imagine that. So listen, part of what I was thinking earlier in my question about what you all have been experiencing this year, in the back of my mind was the specific issue of immigration, ICE, and all of that. And so I did want to see if we could squeeze in a little bit of a discussion about how you all are thinking about or are experiencing. Even in our school district here, we were getting instructions about what we could expect as parents should ICE show up at our schools and stuff like that. So yeah, before we wrap, I definitely would want to hear from you on all on that.
I think that everything that's happening right now with ICE is terrible. I know a lot of people who are very, very afraid right now because of the arrests that are happening on a day-to-day basis. It's very scary for them. So it's hard, I think, for a lot of people, and hardest for the people who are going through it. But I did find something very interesting when I was researching this topic, that these deportations, though ICE, is going at a different level, but it's not new. Under the Obama presidency, there was over 3 million people deported, which I was very surprised to find out about. I had no idea. And then Trump deported around 1 million, and his goal is to surpass that within his next term. However, he hasn't surpassed that yet. So this issue of deportations, though, it's on the news, and there's a lot of talk about it, and it's terrible. It's not new. So that was very interesting to me.
Oh, okay. I thought, yeah, sorry. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I didn't know if anyone else. I wanted to definitely hand the mic to all of my co-panelists first, because I understand that coming from a white person, it doesn't sound the same. But in my experience, I've kind of, because obviously I know I'm never going to feel it to the same extent or in the same way, but more so on the end of Donald Trump's foreign policy sort of current orders. At school, I've had to hold my friends while they were crying because they couldn't go home because Donald Trump banned their countries on no-fly lists. Oh, not sure if I'm glitching. I've had to help friends at school find employment here in the States during the summer because they couldn't go home. I have friends who are at various different schools who have either like witnessed on the side or had their own brushes with these kinds of encounters. And it's, I'm sure for a lot of people, it's kind of, what's the right word? It's such an odd experience to witness those things on the ground, and then to see the way that the media portrays it from your phone later that night, you know, because at the end of the day, I think so much of our conversation around deportations and immigration is so muddled by propaganda that's meant to dehumanize one another and dehumanize our, you know, at the end of the day, fellow brothers and sisters. And so I know obviously it doesn't, obviously my experience is very different from the people who are experiencing it the most immediately, of course. But I did want to say that my experiences have only reinforced to me what feels like an ever more pressing need to just continue to ground ourselves in the fact that we have to help one another. Like when people are experiencing, as you said, like Jared, that parents are receiving instruction manuals on how to handle ICE, we have to do that for one another. We have to, if we see somebody who's being approached by people in plain clothes, we have to step in. That's, I feel like, more and more becoming our duty as citizens to take care of one another as fellow, not even just as citizens, but as just fellow members and people within this country. We have to take care of one another in the ways that we can. And like Zooey, you said, I understand that, like, with everything compiling, it feels so hard to take this kind of action on among everything else. But at the end of the day, like, I think there are still ways that we can work on this stuff. I mean, even like with PSA, we're very extremely precise in the way that we use language to tell stories and in the way that we center people to tell those stories, in combating what I was talking about earlier in terms of the media narrative that only serves to dehumanize typically Black and brown folks and immigrant folks. And so I think we do really need to work harder to strike that kind of balance in obviously managing ourselves within this system that just continues to pile on fear and fear and fear, but also recognizing ourselves in the points of privilege that we may do have in being able to help one another. And even without those points of privilege, just being able to recognize the mutual owens that we have to one another to take care of one another. But I wanted to definitely get that in there. Yeah.
Thanks, Zoe. I want to add to that too. So my families, we're all from the Caribbean. But what I'll also add to that is we're all Black. So the threat that the police poses in terms of brutality and violence towards us and racial profiling, all those still exist. And if I had to, so I didn't hear a lot of concern from my family members, friends who are Black about ICE. And I'm mostly, my analysis of this as to, well, why would that be, would be that this is just another police force that that can be used to operate in similar ways that the police can, and actually probably has more power because it's backed by the executive, by the federal government. So what I will say about how I'm perceiving the use of ICE throughout the nation is this is to me looking like a way of mobilizing some sort of militaristic force without having to declare war on the people of the United States, and also as a vehicle to ensure that a person's due process rights don't have to be followed. It doesn't have to be. You don't get a chance to plead your case. You don't get the presumption of innocence that you would normally get if you were facing criminal charges.
No, right on. And just quickly, I would want to invite all of you gathered on screen and those in the audience and those who see this later to join us on Saturdays with Renee and our co-hosts, with my my co-host, or for whom I am a co-host, because in part because of this particular issue, she has did a lot of updating on some of what you brought up, Fatima, about the deportations of Obama and making those comparisons. And when we spoke with Amanda Thompson Johnson about his experience at Cornell and his comrade Mamadou Tal and his deportation. So there's, we invite you all to tap in with all of that as well. As we do start to point towards a close, I want to, just invite some concluding thoughts from each of you before we wrap up, or anything that you want to leave us with or ask us to consider before we get out of here?
Yeah, really quickly, kind of piggybacking off of Ashton and Zoe, I think it's like also in this conversation around immigration, and I think in some ways the genocide in Gaza has also enlightened this, but at the end of the day, we are on stolen land. And so I just think it's absolutely ludicrous to limit any sort of immigration on land that's not ours to make decisions about. And kind of going back to the climate discussion and back to community organizing and kind of going back to it all, I think centering Indigenous voices at this time is really important. And, we talk about Black and Brown communities, but I think sometimes we forget. And I don't know, I think that's really interesting. Kind of a tangent on that. Like I said, I was in Miami, and I didn't realize that the Seminoles actually own the Hard Rock franchise, which I thought was a really interesting kind of example of, we talk about capitalism and Black capitalism, but how, capitalism can even infiltrate Native communities, which are kind of separate from, on reservations from the general population. So I don't know, just something to chew on, but that was interesting.
For my concluding thoughts, to kind of piggyback on what everyone said during this town hall, I think, number one, it is very important to ensure that our legal structures stay protected in the next 4 years, and to advocate for that, to unite for that. And it is important to understand that our leaders have interests that are not directly related to us, but to always remember that we're the ones, without the people, there's no power for them. And so if we truly do want change, it is our job to unite for it. And whether that be through the issues of climate change, the AI regulation, or the vast issues that we discussed today, it is important that we always continue organizing for that. And then on the and then it's very important, especially when you mentioned the immigration issue and the ICE raids, to ensure that our core values of protecting human rights are always at the forefront, because I think no matter where on the political spectrum you fall, it is important that you never treat a group with you never treat a group as if they're below being treated with human rights. You never treat a group without dignity, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. And that's what's lacking right now in America, and has been lacking for a few decades with this increased politicization. And I think it's very important to bring that dignity and that focus on human rights in whatever aims we have.
Yes. I think for my concluding thoughts, I definitely want to kind of implicate the use of technology and how that has kind of been weaponized to build these stratified systems. So with concerns about ICE and AI, to, I guess, quote unquote, secure the homeland. And this is to Richard's question said in the chat before. So through technologies like facial recognition and phone number normalization, these technologies definitely don't exist in a vacuum. There have been studies that facial recognition technology has been proven to have disproportionately high error rates for darker skinned individuals. And I wanted to acknowledge that. And this is particular for Black and Indigenous people. And when ICE does use this flawed technology, it does dramatically increased chances of misidentification, wrongful arrest, and deportation of people who are already over-policed. And I really do think that this sets some very concerning paradigms for the weaponization of technology in the future. And I definitely think that being very critical of these technologies, of this ever-growing pace of capitalism, is definitely a way we can start to deconstruct and ameliorate these deeply ingrained systems. Because beyond it being a digital rights issue for these communities, I do really believe that it is a matter of life and death. And to Shawnee's point before, we have to give care to these communities, and definitely treat everyone and every community with a layer of human dignity. And I definitely think that that is the best way to move forward and approach these issues, rather than kind of conceding to a two-party political system. So that's just my remaining thoughts.
I can go next. I think my thoughts are, I think I wonder, well, how did I get to my current view of the world? And I think it's just asking myself questions daily, not daily, but, with some sort of frequency. Questions like, what do I believe people deserve by virtue of being born? Do I feel like they deserve healthcare? Do I feel like they deserve access to water, food, education? And if all those things are a yes, then it's then thinking about, okay, well, what parts of our current world do I believe in that get in the way of those ideals? Do I believe we should have billionaires? Well, if we do have billionaires, okay, what should their role be in the world? Does that match my reality? And even thinking about why do I think I have, do I deserve what I have in life right now? Should I have the job that I have? Is this all because I worked for it, or is this because I was put in a specific place by the area I was born, by the types of connections that I made throughout my life? So really getting at the idea of understanding why people are in the places that they might be, because I think you'll more than not find that the reason is institutions put them there that want to profit off of their exploitation. So I think those questions are pretty central for me. I think we touched on a lot of that in our chat today. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
I can go briefly. I think there's always like a reckoning with like, oh, what is your place in this world, or what is the privilege that I have even being here, or in a lot of the points that people have brought up, there's almost like a reckoning that's almost conflated with your sense of self, etc. But the fact that all of us are thinking through that in our own right is in itself a privilege to have. I think it's okay for everyone to have different opinions, and actually good for us to have different thoughts that can come together, and I guess just feel a bit inspired. And also the idea that we each have an individual power that we can exercise, that there is that is something that is deeply personal to you, and something that you should utilize in the world. Like, you might be surrounded by your coworkers, you might be surrounded by your classmates, and not feel like you're able to push the boundary on anything. But at the end of the day, even just thinking those thoughts and pushing that each day, I'm sure, like, if I think of like even my own political thoughts this year versus last year, it's definitely changed a lot and matured, even by process of being a part of these panels, makes me come to a reckoning of like, what do I believe in and why? And I think that clarity of thought, if everyone continues to do that, will lead to that collective empathy and change that we've all sort of been saying.
I guess I'll go next. I think it's interesting, like, off of what you guys are saying, I think of everything, very much from a spiritual perspective, being that we're all where we are for a reason, and that we all have a responsibility to um, to do things for each other that, help us, like, elevate in this world, because we will be held accountable for the things that we do and don't do, whether it's in this world or I believe in, another one. But yeah, and another closing thought that I wanted to end with is, I think that fear is the most dangerous thing that anybody could have, because if you are afraid, then you are limiting yourself to the creation of more ideas. You're limiting yourself to a greater possibility of something that you maybe are not imagining because you're just so afraid. And if you're afraid, then you are allowing other people to control you. And so it's really important that fear doesn't enter, and it can be hard, but there has to be hope, like, always, because if there's no hope, then there's no potential for any progress to be made.
Did
I think that
everybody
was
go? Oh,
I
okay, right
oh,
on.
sorry.
No, I just enjoy. I've been enjoying it, so it just got lost in the sauce. Well, listen, I first of all, from my perspective, I just want to thank you all very much for this series of panels, for being invited to participate and host. Big shout out to Josie and Renee, of course. And Josie, if you're ready, you can come back on camera, and I'll bring you back up on stage. But this has just been great for me, and I hope those watching have enjoyed this half as much at minimum as I have. And thank you all very much. Josie, go ahead. Yeah.
I think maybe Zoe, you were left.
Oh, Zoe, sorry. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
good.
Zoe, why don't you go first?
Yeah, all I really wanted to say was it's unfortunate that we only have 2 hours, because I felt like we were really just getting started. But I really just wanted to cement the importance of these kinds of conversations, especially in emancipatory journalism kind of context, and the context of the work that PSA does. Being able to not just have these conversations, but document these conversations, for these conversations to be used in classrooms, for people to watch them. And also, just every time I hear one of the panelists say that they feel like they had such a big growth experience from this, not only do I relate with it, but it just makes me really happy, because this is such a difficult time as someone who's in Gen Z, to really navigate the current, or like the contemporary political space, because you just have so many voices. There's so much of an inundation of propaganda at this point. It's just, sometimes it does feel impossible. And so to have these kinds of spaces where people can get together and talk, and not only get together and talk, but see themselves 6 months later, a year later, and see, oh wow, I was saying that a year ago. Oh my God. Like I've developed so much more since then. I think so much differently now. I feel like having those kinds of conversations is so important, and documenting them is so important. And it's so critical to the kind of work that we do at Public Square, in committing ourselves in engagement with the community and community journalism. And I wanted to also use my last few words to just express that that the safety of that local news is under threat. Currently within New Jersey, the state budget is allotting zero funding for local and hyperlocal news. And so I wanted to just encourage folks to visit the New Jersey Civic Information Consortium and Public Square Amplified and all of their other local news institutions, and just look into how they can help and how they can support their local news, contribute to it, honestly, because we need more voices. We need all kinds of voices in the space. And so I really just wanted to use my last few words to cement that. And now I may hand it over to Josie.
No, thank you so much. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, everyone. Local news at hyperlocal level is hard work. It's rigorous, and it's challenging, and it's gratifying. It's fun, but it's hard. And so thank you, Zoe, for giving a shout out to the consortium. Without the consortium, we would be a smaller group, and we are a small group right now. Thank you so much to the 7 panelists who showed up. I think what you represent is we're all sort of a time of great struggle, intellectually a great struggle, socially a great struggle, politically. And I so appreciate you being open to the honesty of struggling in a public space. And engaging in ways that we don't often see young people engaged in. We're committed to doing it at Public Square Amplified. We're committed to nurturing more young people. We'll do it through our community journalism class this summer, as we've done for the past 2 years. We'll continue to do the kind of news that that I believe in, that Public Square wants to produce. So just thank everyone for showing up and being supportive. And yes, support platforms like Public Square Amplified and like Black Liberation Media. This is an amazing collaboration for us. We really appreciate it. So thank you all. Thank you.
No, right on. This has been great. Thank you all very much. Please, everybody, like, share, subscribe, support the platform. Please sign up. The link to Public Square Amplified is in the show description, as well as scrolling across the screen. And as always, peace. Because I know, as Fred Hampton used to say, you all will fight for it.
Thank you.
Thank
Till
you.
next time. Take care, everybody.